Well, hello, everybody. I'm David Kirkpatrick of Techonomy, coming to you from the floor of a hotel room in Mountain View, California. And I'm very happy to introduce this session called Media Production in a Post-Pandemic World. We hope it's a post-pandemic world. It's certainly a post the beginning of a pandemic world, presented in partnership with IBM. We're going to really have a fascinating conversation about the landscape for creative people in this strangely altered world. And let me quickly introduce the other people who will be speaking that I will be moderating a conversation with. Peter Thompson is the CEO of and co-founder of a company called Lucid. You're going to meet that company and him in just a minute. Dave Helmley is head of strategic development at Adobe Professional Services, and a real big thinker about what's happening with professional video, a video expert of the highest order. You guys can all leave your video on, turn it on. Greg Pizzuti is director of media and entertainment industries at IBM. And finally, Zachary Bennett, who is a late joiner, thanks to his generosity. We really wanted to get his perspective on this. Zachary is executive director of Medscape Studios at WebMD and a major video producer, and has really gone through a lot of changes in the pandemic, as you'll hear. So we know that the world has shifted to home and away from the office in the last 2 years. Amazing that it's literally just about 2 years now. And all of our lives have really changed. Now, for many of us who work with, words like myself, or could have our meetings on Zoom, we got a lot done. But in the world of video production in particular, it's been especially challenging because the size of the files that people in video work with are so large that doing it remotely has not been a slam dunk. And we'll hear about how people historically have done that to adapt. And we'll also hear in some detail about some very specific new ways to do it that Lucid basically makes possible, and that Adobe and IBM are helping to facilitate. So I wanted to start out by asking Dave of Adobe, because you work, Dave, with such a variety of different kinds of clients and customers of Adobe. You've been at Adobe for something like 25 years, and you know what the creative community does and how they think and what their challenges are. So how has that changed in the pandemic generally? And what are the challenges that you've encountered during this strange period?
Yeah, I think those are really good questions, and I think it's the questions that are on everybody's mind. I think the first thing to really sort of understand, I think it's why everybody's here, is what are we trying to get done this year, a year after COVID? And I think a lot of people are kind of sick of hearing about the pandemic, but it has really changed everything. I think we can all.
We're sick of living in the pandemic, but that's
no question. And I think Adobe just sort of has a general view that we still just want our customers to create anywhere, anytime. And that has been a huge challenge, and what we're seeing, it's not as much about remote work, because I think we've kind of lived that over the year. People are going back to the office and more of, I think we can all agree, in a hybrid mode. So hybrid's going to be the new norm. And that actually creates more challenges than you might think as we've kind of gotten into this. So whether you're in the office or remote, now the tools need to work the same. So as we get talking about the solution today, later on, you have to sort of think about, what does this work like if I'm actually in the office? Does it work the same? Because if it doesn't, then it's not particularly productive at all, right? So the tools they're changing, right? They have to be centrally shared, but they have to be secure. And again, keeping all of this in mind, that these assets are now being created remotely, which has all sorts of concerns when you start thinking about network news and all these other different things. This would never have been allowed a year ago, right? So new concepts have also sort of come up, like camera to cloud. How can I go from a camera in the field, click a button and have that record directly to a cloud, so we could then do another kind of conversation, which is around collaboration tools, right? So how do we talk about what was captured, what media is being created? How do we get better communication across the organization around these creative assets that are generated and also archived? And I'll leave one point that I think is a great thing to point out, is the tools need to not get in the way of the creator. If I need an IT person to help me configure this thing, and I got to know how to map a drive or go to some share app where I got to know what a target and a source, and people that have been around a while know exactly what I'm talking about. It just needs to work the same. So my creative work will work as fast as my mind, right? So I got to be able just to move along and not let the tech get in the way. So I hope that summarizes sort of my thoughts, Peter, because I think about this all the time in view of the customer.
That's great, Dave. And we should say that if anybody doesn't know, Adobe Premiere Pro is pretty much the de facto and certainly industry leading tool that video editors use for making movies and commercials and professional video of the type they do at WebMD, et cetera. So, okay, with that intro, Peter, let's go to you. What did Lucid Link do to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, David. So I guess first I'd kind of preface this to say that it's not necessarily a new problem. In fact, it was the germinating problem that started Lucid Link. We, in a little bit of a different context, we had a team of software engineers who are highly distributed across continents, who also needed real-time access to large files and large sets of data to be able to be productive in the way that their workflow was. And that's really what started the company, the idea for the company that got us going. And that was 10 years ago. So even in the creative content space, this has been moving to cloud, remote workflows, cloud editing. These have all been topics that have been talked about for quite some time. But what was really kind of missing was the catalyst. In the beginning, we were talking about that would be a nice to have. Maybe it's a 70 out of 100 in terms of a great big long list of priorities. And then enter the pandemic, when suddenly entire teams were sent home literally overnight, and it was escalated to a number one or a number two priority. And suddenly, the projects that were already in progress, we had to get those out the door and then figure out, well, how long is this going to last and how can we maintain productivity? So what we found, and for Lucid Link, which is actually a general usage storage technology, we can talk a little bit about that, but the design tenet we had for it was to be able to just provide a mount point or a drive that allows you to use it, kind of as Dave Helmley was talking about, in the ways where we're accustomed to being in the office and using storage with a file server and just going to a mount point and using it. And without having to change people's behavior and workflows and learning new things, just be able to allow them to immediately adopt it and continue doing things the way they have been doing it. And where that resonated, I think you highlighted in the beginning, where that really resonated, where the biggest points of pain were, and that is in workflows and tech and verticals that we're using, especially large files and big sets of data, and had to do it in a collaborative manner. And first and foremost for us, and the one that found us to try to solve that problem, was in this media and entertainment space, and especially around video editing.
Awesome. Well, we'll come back to some of the details of how that all works. But let's go to you, Zach. Okay, you oversee how many editors and how many videos do you make, and what did you experience?
Sure, yeah. It's all good questions, and I promise David that I will not go into my 30-minute soliloquy on everything that we've had to accomplish during the pandemic. I'm going to boil it down to a few points for you. It's true though. We have a very large media team. We do an awful lot of video work, both before the pandemic and after. Right now we have 19 editors, 16 full-time producers. We have 10, sort of studio operation folks who manage media and also help out on productions, and of course production management, post-production coordinator. So it's a guy's team. We're spread out over North America and Europe. We do have 6 studios in the US with WebMD and Netscape, and we have 3 studios in Europe. 2,800 videos we did this past year in 2021. Every year, of course, we're doing more and more, but that's 54 videos per week. It's a lot, and I will say that a good 60% of those we're turning around our first preview cut within 2 days, and oftentimes it's 24-hour turnaround. So there's no doubt speed, volume. These are things that we've always had to deal with, and I think you mentioned this early on. I think, or maybe Peter had mentioned this, that this was not a new problem to solve. We were doing this work, in 2019 as well. We traveled to almost 50 different countries around the world filming productions. And so the idea of a centralized location, like our Lucid Link space, had we known about it then, we probably would have looked in it sooner. Of course, we were forced into this space because of the pandemic, and it's transformed how we work. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I'm thankful, first of all, that we did find it, but secondly, there's no doubt it's opened up a lot of new possibilities for us.
Zach, what did you do? If you you are using Lucid Link, which is one of the reasons you're here on the session, but if you didn't have it, what would you be doing instead? And what were you doing before?
Yeah, so as I met 2019, the last year that was normal for us and for everyone, I suspect, we had producers traipsing across the world, no doubt, filming productions. They would do an edit, all drives would come back to New York, our home office, 400 terabyte server there. That's where most of our editors were based. So everything had to come back, and we used everything, right? FedEx, Dropbox, WeTransfer, you name it. We've tried to transfer footage that way. Obviously FedEx was for all of our larger files, but everything came back to the home office. So there was no doubt a lag time, especially if we were in Latin America doing productions. We've been to China a few times doing productions. The FedEx doesn't necessarily go as fast as you and I would hope in the States. There is absolutely some lag time there. So we built that into our timeline. We did shoots. We could certainly do turnarounds on our edits, but in order to get it back to the home office to really finalize it, we had to wait. And that's the problem that we have absolutely solved now, is everything's going up to Lucid Link.
And in the old days, when everybody was in your main offices in New York, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you have all those editors and producers basically sitting in one physical location using that gigantic server that you stored it all on, and they could work in real time together when they were all connected in the office to one big server, right? But that's what you couldn't duplicate in the pandemic.
We could not, and in fact, look, our producers, we do have a number based sort of in the New York area near the home office, but producers weren't even sitting there. They would come in and out, dropping off material they had filmed. It wasn't just, they would deliver it themselves if they were nearby. But you're right, everyone's accessing that same server in real time. And it was, it's what you'd expect from a large production house. Everyone's there, you're connected, you got your connection, everyone can share between editors, no problem. And of course, I probably should have pulled out some pictures, because we do have pictures of right around March, when the pandemic first hit. The drives that have stacked up on our desks that are still in the office today, I'm sure you've probably seen this, but there's dozens of drives. There may even be 100 drives there that have just come in, and it's like, who was even there to dump it to our server? That was really something that we had to solve for quickly.
Okay, good. A lot of great stuff already. Now, so Greg, why does IBM care about all this, and what have you done about it? And thank you for partnering. And this is obviously one of the reasons we have you here and we're doing the session, but you have done something very creative, and explain it for us, if you could.
Sure. So as a vendor in the industries, IBM focused on hybrid cloud. And for the media and entertainment industry, we're constantly listening to our clients and looking to solve problems. So for us, we like to provide our products and services to these clients. An avenue that we always take is to be always on the watch for what our partners are doing and what potential new partners are doing. So we've always had a long-standing relationship with Adobe. We work very closely with them. We're working very closely together with Adobe in the finance industry. So we were already in progress of looking to see what we're doing there and how we could leverage it into media. And along comes LucidLink. So LucidLink comes down the path, they start adopting some of our infrastructure. We learn more about this solution, like this is a great solution. We're really excited about it. And so we start thinking about what's the best way to communicate this to more clients. And so it so happens it's a nice connection between Adobe, LucidLink, and IBM to have a real true solution that we're going to be discussing today to help our clients. That's why we're here, David. So to get the message out, to hopefully make it easier for our clients to edit video.
And the deal is that, you know, the video's now got to be stored in the cloud, and there's a lot of companies that will store it in the cloud for you. But what you've done is make a special arrangement with LucidLink and Adobe so that if through LucidLink, and LucidLink actually offers the service, the customer is using the IBM cloud, there are a lot of cost and efficiency advantages that they can attain that way. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, it is. And I see there's two primary things. First of all, there's been a technology issue, which we've talked about, and we're going to talk about more today. But there's also a very important business issue. The cost associated with editing in the cloud today, and we're going to hear more from Zach, who's really the expert at it. But what we've seen and our customers have told us is it's often opaque. We don't know what the bill is going to be. We're not sure. So we felt if we were going to come to market with LucidLink and Adobe, we would have a more a pricing model that was more consistent and visible. And so one of the major issues is egress fees as we're moving videos around. So we worked out a special agreement with LucidLink. So it's much more predictable now what the cost will be associated with this activity.
Greg, explain what an egress fee is, because I'm sure some of the people don't even know that.
Sure. Egress fees is when you're working in the cloud and you're moving files in and out. Often some cloud vendors will charge you for all of those movements, whether it's leaving the cloud, moving in the cloud. So we've worked with LucidLink to eliminate the egress fees to make the pricing model much simpler and frankly cheaper for all those clients.
Okay, awesome. Hey, I want to go to some other questions, but before I do, I wanted to say two things. One, please ask questions. There are a lot of experts in this field on the call, I know. And also, if you're not an expert, feel free to ask dumb questions. That's the best question in a way. I also want to make one bigger comment and apologize that we have 5 white guys doing a panel, because at Techonomy, we know that is not a good idea in general, and we don't think it's representative of the world we live in. It's just the way it worked out this time. So just know we realized that was our sad development here, and apologies from one of those white guys. But let me go to you, Peter, back to the issue that Greg was just talking about. And you know, this issue of how cloud services are priced is so interesting. And I talked to you and your co-founder, George Dochev, about this at some length for an article that I wrote, which, by the way, if anybody didn't see it, if you want to know a little bit about this, I wrote a piece that's up at techonomy.com's brand new redesigned website, by the way. You can read that. But how do you're a longtime network and storage engineer, and that's where you're coming from. And, you know, we live in the world of the cloud, but just talk a little bit about how customers have had to deal with that.
Well, first of all, I'm not an engineer. I have been over 20 years in the storage and networking
You're
space.
an expert anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. But yeah, it's absolutely true. You know, the when even we were starting to build our service and trying to be able to figure out all the unit economics and make comparisons to everything that was out there, you know, the biggest problem, even for us as someone that is well versed in the technology and everything, was taking a look at the invoices we were receiving from cloud providers and trying to make heads or tails of it. You know, it was literally a 3 to 4 page affair of things that, price per 10,000 API level 2 API calls. or, and it's like, okay, well, what's the level 2 API call? How many are we making? Why are we making them? Who knows? And to pass that directly on to customers was just something we felt was, we knew that was going to be an inhibitor, especially when a lot of our customer base started coming to us and saying, you know what, we don't really have the cloud expertise in-house. We don't want to set up buckets. We don't want to manage it, protect them, monitor them, and do all that, let alone the hardware on-prem. We don't want to do that at all. Can you provide us something that is more of a curated service? And then as we started doing that, we started hearing that the biggest problem was around the predictability. Sure, people can estimate how much capacity they're going to have to utilize for specific projects. And that's relatively easy. But then when you start talking about, well, how much of that project am I going to constantly be downloading out of the cloud on a daily basis across 100 creative editors? I have no idea. And that comes at the end of the month in arrears. So it's always kind of a nasty surprise. You hold your breath when you open up the PDF that came in your inbox and go, okay, what's the damage going to be? So that's really what we were trying to solve, is figure out the predictability in that. And that's when we began speaking with IBM to how to solve that problem.
Yeah, and what you came up with them, and not to make this too much of a commercial, but it's pretty unusual, right? I mean, just quickly describe that from your perspective. And then I want to go to Dave and to talk a little bit about the Lucid Link technology and how it works, because you're more objective about it. But okay.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things is the technology itself does lend itself to helping to reduce those egress fees, because one of the things, we can get into this later, but one of the core things that we do differently is we're not constantly downloading entire files, working on them, pushing them back up and doing that. What we're doing is accessing the data in place in the cloud and only transferring portions of the file that's required for each of those editors as needed. So that reduces a lot of the overall download bulk just in and of itself. But when we went to IBM, they were hearing the same things. And I think that this is why it resonated and why we were able to decide to collaborate so quickly. They were hearing the exact same things from their customers. And that is, the cost to store things in public cloud, just the storage cost is relatively low. The cost to download it from there is extremely high, way higher than what bandwidth would cost. And so why is that? And of course, bandwidth isn't free. There is a cost to it. But in working with, in this particular use case, knowing that, Lucid Link helps customers utilize the data on the edge. So by nature, we are downloading portions of those files. And that's when we worked with IBM to drastically lower that cost, building it into a model that we essentially pass on all those savings to the customers. And basically we're giving we're reducing that portion, which is the largest portion of the overall cloud cost, by about 80%.
Okay, that's really, really well said. Okay, Dave. So a lot of people, when they're confronted with the story of Lucid Link, simply don't believe it, right? That you could really have multiple people working on video at the same time and not have it get all screwed up and it, not have to pull down the whole file. So just talk about how it works from your perspective and, what you've learned about why it works.
Sure. And Zach and I know each other, by the way. So Zach also, I think, has some really.
I will definitely go to Zach.
He got into, yeah. But so Zach, you can add on to what I'm saying. But I think the first thing we really need to point out to the people here is we're talking a lot about video. That's my world. That's where I live and breathe every day, as people know, and people on this session here. But this really is for any file, whether it's a Photoshop file, an Acrobat file, InDesign, Substance, whatever it is. So just keep in mind, video is the hardest one to solve. And we did that first. And I certainly commend Lucid Link on that. It's like, if we attack this and we got this, everything else is a piece of cake. So just keep that in mind. If we've got people that are on this session that are not video producers and video productions, if you're just creators in general, and even office workers for that matter, any of those documents will play. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, as we dive into a little deeper into this solution, what attracted me is it's the only one that I've found that works on Mac and Windows, which is extremely important, certainly in the Adobe ecosystem, as we have, a very sort of equal view of users out there. And it's important to let a creator create, on the tool that they want to use. So you shouldn't have to dictate what flavor of computer they use. And on the other side, we have this smaller group on Linux, which, it's not something I deal a lot with as far as our tools go, but they are part of the video ecosystem for special effects and all that. And it was great to talk to some Hollywood customers and other high-end media and entertainment customers. Said, look, for those Linux, users, they can join the share as well. And this is is really huge, because when you look at this, much less having Mac compatibility, and I would tell anyone, go out there and look at the solutions that are out there, compare it to what's been accomplished here, and then say, how do we bring all these users together to have the same view? So I'll also back up another second and say, what happens when you get Lucid Link, and what really attracted me? Lucid Link looks like any other drive on your computer, right? So if you plug in a USB drive or an external Thunderbolt drive or a network drive, it shows up with a nice icon. You double click on it, you can drag things in and out just like you would any other drive. And remember what I said in my original opening statement is these tools need to work and not get in the way. If they start getting in the way, your brain is just creating way faster than you can. And so you have to kind of join those together. So create as fast as your mind can think. So that's the beautiful thing, is it works exactly like the ecosystem you're already in. If you're Mac or Windows, Linux, doesn't make any difference. And everyone can sort of play in the same pool. The setup is extremely easy. I think the biggest thing is because cost, and I know we spend a big time on cost. It is so, unpredictable when you start talking about cloud storage. I think Lucid Link has really helped bring that, more into focus to say, look, this is on our mind. And Peter, you and I have had this conversation. You guys are working on different ways to help people with egress charges, with these ways that it caches in these sort of temporary files that they can hang on to. Obviously, they're working with IBM to make sure they're getting the best pricing. So that should make you feel pretty good right there, because that has been a fairly big blocker in people sort of joining this type of workflow. And I'll just tell you, I don't think it's as much of a worry as it might be. And then lastly, there's no sync and share. So people want to talk about, well, where does the budget come from this tool? Well, if you think about it, you might have a bunch of other tools that do, if I send a 2 GB file over to Zach, Gregory is on is sort of on the team that's looking at this, but he doesn't actually need a 2 GB file to be downloaded, and it starts polluting his drive and making his connection slower for whatever reason. Lucid Link doesn't work that way. It's a very predictable. You say, look, I'll give you 5 gigs, well, however much you want. It will never take more than that. It intelligently manages this thing we call cache, and also allows that to do just-in-time playback on the Premiere timeline. So we're playing back, people might want to know, 1080 HD video, 4K files, raw files from a RED camera, and all these other things. It works exactly the same way as it does on a hard drive. So again, not getting in the way of the, technology is not getting in the way of the creativity. And to me, that was the biggest thing. And then I'll end on one point. After I saw this, I immediately called a few of my sort of, I call them nerds of a feather customers, where we just said, let's just get into a conversation, because help me understand this, because it doesn't make any sense. And I consider myself a futurist, right? So when we started playing with this, I had to have them test it out and say, I'm not exactly sure what's happening here. I invited them to my share, and we just had this great conversation. I introduced them to Lucid Link, and I won't tell you who they are, but there's some large customers that are very thankful that we introduced them to this solution. So
Cool.
I'll end on that.
Thank you, Dave. So Zach, I know you had some editors who literally refused to use it because they didn't believe it could possibly work.
They definitely were, yeah, skeptical and would, the way Lucid works is you are working directly off of the cloud, and they were absolutely skeptical that that was possible, and they would end up downloading everything off of Lucid to work locally, which it definitely took a little while. But I did want to harken back to what Peter said, because I think it's important about egress, which I'm not technical. I don't know a whole lot about cloud storage. I certainly know a lot about video production, but cloud storage is new to me. Egress, I figured was, that's, if there's a fire in your building, you got to find your exit, right? but when I started digging into this, it was like, okay, wait, not only I know how much space I have, I kind of have an idea of what new work we're going to do and how much space that's going to take up, but how much is going to come down? How much am I downloading at a time? Is it upload? I mean, then I'm starting to think, oh gosh, is this going to affect, like, if I want to re-edit something, like, am I going to start thinking like, no, we don't touch it too much because you're going to have more egress charges. Like, it was just so confusing and also a bit unsettling. And that's honestly what made Lucid just such a easy fix for us when we found it. It simplified the process. Honestly, again, I'm not technical in that world, and so it made it very straightforward.
Okay, I want to go.
Hey, Dave, I just wanted to add something to what Zach was saying, because he and I have
The
talked
only
about
other
this.
person here calls me Dave is my brother, who happens to be on this. I go by David, but go ahead.
Yes, sir, David. So, by the way, my mother's the same way, because my name's David, but somehow I've adopted this other name. So one thing to look at, and IBM really has a pretty awesome solution here, is if I need to log in, which I do, to Japan and work with that team, I just mount their Lucid Link share and I just edit it. So we have people all around the planet that might log on to India, might log on to Japan, wherever we are, and it works the same. Now, I'm not saying that you should work in your own zone. You'll get the best performance that way. But is it usable? Is it a pretty good experience? Absolutely. So keep that in mind as well, that when Zach talked about all these international places that he has to go, he can mount those volumes and move things around as necessary. And that's pretty unbelievable that someone in New York can go join and edit in one of these other faraway countries and then participate as if they're in the office. So remember my original statement, hybrid has to work exactly the same way as if you're in the office or if you're in India.
Yeah, I've been a technology journalist for over 30 years, and I still sometimes have trouble believing how easy it is to work globally on something. It's sort of mind-bending. But going directly to, I want to get to you, Greg, in a second, but back to you, Zach, for a second on this issue of who you work with. I mean, you've been hiring people even during the pandemic, and I assume you're able to hire them now, even if they don't live in New York, and it's not a problem, right?
Yeah. No, it's very true and tough. Dave, I would just mention, I actually, when I have folks who are logging into our Lucid space, I don't know where that space is living, to be honest. It's just on my computer. It looks like my USB drive is just plugged in there. So it is kind of a no-brainer once you log in. But no, I mean, it goes to, the simplicity of the system is what made it absolutely something that we could dive into. I think we probably spent a month testing it out before we were like, this is obviously going to, and it really is because the ease of the use is, we used to mount our server in New York, when we were there at the office, it would show up as a hard drive. We have all our folders, and all of a sudden now we just decide to mount our Lucid Link file space, and it looks the same to everyone who's using it. So what happened though is, you're right, as we started, as the pandemic happened, we need, more content is needed. Now it absolutely opened it up. We no longer need to have everyone focused around one brick and mortar server. They can be anywhere, which is, amazing. And it also opened it up for all of the vendors we're with, because we can give them a little piece of our Lucid space on their own. We have a special space for them. They can use it up and down as they see fit. And all of our editors, all of our producers have access to that. So it really has transformed the way that we can sort of engage with everyone that we work with, which has been great.
In many cases, it's taking place of the brick and mortar server. That's really important to understand, because that's what needs to happen, except maybe for our
our server's gone. We pulled it out a few months ago, and it was already 7 years old, so we were going to have to re-up on a new server, and this is what we decided to do, because this is obviously true.
So you're going to keep doing it no matter, even if a lot of your people were back in the office, you'll probably still use this this approach?
Oh, yeah. And in
Yeah.
fact, when there's been lulls in the pandemic, people come into the office. They want to come in and they're working at the office. We have nice machines there, and they work at the office on the Lucid server. Absolutely.
Okay, by the way, Gary Scheig, if I pronounce his name right, who works for you, said,
Yeah, Shaggy.
totally agreeing with everything you're saying in the chat. So Greg, talk a little bit more about IBM's perspective on this. And, I know you've been building up your business in media and entertainment, but and you should definitely talk about how you think about security, because that's been an IBM obsession, in all the 30 years I've been a tech journalist too.
Sure. I mean, we're happy to be the infrastructure, be behind the scenes here, and I appreciate all the complimentary things my fellow speakers are saying here today. But this aligns well with IBM's strategy around hybrid cloud. So while we may be talking about a specific use case here in a technology solution via Lucid Link, we'll also have many of the same business challenges for other applications. So for example, if you look at the domain of application resource management, this is an area, David, where many clients are using the cloud. They're getting bills and they're not sure what they're being charged for. So IBM made significant investment in this space. We've acquired a company called Turbonomic. We acquired a company called Instana. And what they do is analyze the usage, the storage, the APIs, the calls, to make sure that a company, any business, is optimized in their cloud usage. And that, if you think of that as a general enterprise statement, and now you extend it into this digital media solution, that's why it's a natural fit for us in regard to providing technology to help our clients better run their business, whether it's from a business perspective or technology perspective.
Okay.
And David, could I also, because you brought up security, and that also has been a core tenet of ours from the very beginning, and it actually it was so important to us that we wouldn't compromise, and it actually made building the product a lot harder in many instances. We could have taken shortcuts that compromised, and we decided not to, because we understood from our customers how important that was. And afterwards, I'd like to hear Zach's perspective on the importance of security and sort of choosing the solution. But one of the things that we do that's very different from others is that, pretty much every kind of file cloud provider will offer encrypted files at rest. But what we've done is it's client-side encrypted. So the moment that you write it, it gets broken up, encrypted on your machine in transit at rest, and then only gets de-encrypted when it's back at whoever is using that data for their workflow. And this is quite unique in the world of cloud data. I mean, if you think about it, if your cloud or your file service provider can index your files, can play out over a browser the video, guess what? They have access to it. If you read the fine print of some of the cloud providers, they make no bones about it. They say, we're going to mine your data. We're going to use your data, and we have access to it. So it's something definitely to bear in mind. And like I said, I'm interested in Zach's perspective to how important that might be to his business.
Okay, quickly, Zach, because I want to start getting to some audience questions.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, Peter, I think you're spot on. I mean, obviously, security of our content is paramount. And originally, you're right. You couldn't even access it unless you showed a badge at the front door of our office. And so now, with our Lucid system and how I've understood, I think if anyone were to break into a server somewhere, they're just going to get a bunch of bits that no longer compile together. I mean, again, that's my technical understanding of it. But.
Yeah, that sounds like a good way to put it.
And I'll add that some of the largest media houses, certainly in the US and other countries, are using Lucid Link. And we got into the security conversation about SSO and Active Directory, which they support, handed them some Lucid Link white papers, which were very helpful. And security really never came up again. It's a pretty easy objection once you read how they've done it and you get your IT department. And I will say that the pandemic has helped us here. Because before this, as soon as you started to say the word remote, nope, you would never get past any of that concept with IT, and they've been forced down this path. And learn that it isn't as bad maybe as they thought. So security has not really been an issue for our customers as well. And we're starting to use Lucid Link internally, and we have to support SSO just within the own Adobe corporation. And I'm sure IBM would say something similar, that we all have our own security needs from our parent companies. So.
Well, obviously, ever since Kim Jong-un invaded Sony, the industry has been very conscious of this problem. I want to let Jody Westby talk, who is a security expert. It just happens, but also had a good question. So Jody, if you're there, ask what you had on your mind.
Thanks.
Identify yourself, please.
I'm really surprised. Was the video industry behind the times in video development when the pandemic hit? I mean, why wasn't video already in the cloud? Where were your CIOs to enable remote collaboration? And is this change pushing other innovation now in the video industry?
Jody, I'll tell you, it's helping to propel camera to cloud, which I talked about sort of in my opening statement. That's a new concept that someone like Zach at WebMD can sort of say, look, we're on site at this convention and we need to get this media uploaded as fast as possible. And it's not even really uploaded. It just happens when you hit record on the camera. So that is a new concept. But I will say that you got to remember, in the video industry, a lot of media has been stolen. You've heard about all these different movies that get out ahead of time. So there's always extra security around that. Also, a lot of these media houses, if you take news, they create videos to say the person's guilty or not guilty, right? So if either one of those get out before the verdict is done, it could be, pretty bad, right? A lot of lawsuits. So keep that in mind. There is a real secure aspect around this, but the good news is the pandemic has gotten them past that, Jody. And I just think that we've now been able to bring that conversation to the table.
Okay, good. So I'm turning off Jody's speaking capability. Sorry, Jody. And I wanted, Tanya had a question that might have been sort of answered because it was sort of very big picture and sort of what we're talking about, and I don't know if she's still there, but if you're there, Tanya, I'm happy to put you on audio. But in the meantime, there's a question that came in here that if you look, anonymous attendee, I'll read it, but it's in the Q&A. It's more an engineering question that I don't fully understand because I'm just a journalist, but it says, understanding that Lucid Link solves for tier 2 and beyond, do you foresee a need for fast and expensive tier 1 storage beyond the need for high-end filmmaking? If so, what applications might still need fast, expensive on-prem tier 1? And I'm not really sure why the on-prem is in there, but maybe Greg, you have a thought, or anybody else. And Tanya's going to get her question in a minute. She's here. Good.
I can say that, when we were looking at the overall storage landscape and coming from the world of very high-end, high performance data center SAN type of technologies, we don't believe that's going to completely go away. So there will be a place for very, very high transactional or super high bandwidth that has to be on local fiber channel networks or whatever that might be. So yeah, I think there is, but if you really looked at the data that and start classifying and what the requirements are, you'll probably find that at least 80% of that does not need to be on that. And that is, as you say, very expensive, ultra high end, and it carries sort of the life cycle management that makes it even more costly. So short answer, I don't think it's going to completely go away, but I think that there's probably more that could be utilized in some of these newer technologies going to cloud than you might originally suspect.
Great. Another member of the Techonomy community, Tanya, is able to talk. So go ahead and ask your question and identify yourself, Tanya.
Hi, I'm Tanya Kellen. I run Kellen Content, which is a production and distribution company, and we represent a number of producers that work with US studios like Disney, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Discovery Channel, things like that. So we're always thinking of better solutions for storage and for really increasing capacity for real-time workflows so that everybody can just increase capacity, have a better quality work life. And I'm really looking at what is going on in the environment today, especially as we're ramping up a lot of immersive XR experiences and going into 5G.
Tanya, were you familiar with Lucid Link before this? And does it sound like something you might want to try? I'm just curious.
Sounds great. Yeah, I love it. I mean, we have something in some of our regions that we use, like it's called SohoNet, I believe that's what we use. Like my CTO people, every studio I represent, sometimes whether it's a Warner Brothers deal or a Disney deal or a Nickelodeon, they have their preferred, like we've had to actually build our own gated firewalls that are protected a lot of the time. Like if I work with Discovery, they have their own Dropbox type of link. So you have to link up with theirs, right? But I like the idea for other more indie services where we can have a preferred cost, because the costs are ridiculous for all these different cloud services. So I like this Lucid Link idea when there's just, as you say now, we're going into a world where everybody needs a ton of content and security and privacy is paramount. So to have different solutions, but I find everybody has their different solutions. There's like, so really you have to be in this, what I call platform agnostic kind of omni-channel universe, right? What I would love to know is Lucid Link's pricing, and I'm very excited to hear that there's a cost-effective solution.
Yeah, explain how it's charged for, Peter.
Sure. So really, it's based on the capacity. What we're trying to do is provide, and we're evolving as we listen to our customers and as we do things like the deal we have with IBM. But we want to make it as simple as possible and predictable as possible. So we've adopted primarily based on the amount of capacity that you're storing in the system and a per gigabyte that we measure on a daily basis and charge as either a pure SaaS model in arrears, or with a lot of our customers, they find it easier to treat it more like on an annual commitment base and associated discounts and things like that go along with that.
Mm-hmm.
So you pay based on how much video you're trying to store,
right?
And then you also have a per user license kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the analog. You know, people like we said already. What is being replaced? Generally, it's file servers and on-prem storage devices.
Right.
And that's really how that's priced, and that's how that's scoped, and that's how the depreciation cycles kind of go along with that. So I think it makes the most sense for the business in most of the customers that we speak to.
Good.
Yeah, got it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
And hey, Tanya, I'll add one thing that might make you smile is, look at what we're doing here. Like, to me, and no offense to Greg, I find there's nothing more boring than storage. I mean, storage is just one of those things that just isn't fun to talk about. This is actually pretty amazing that we're having this conversation, because this is next level sort of stuff. This is where the future is headed. And when you get the opportunity to try it, and you sort of see how these micro blocks stream in real time down to something like a Premiere timeline, you'll see what I mean.
Yes.
And Greg, I hope you like this statement. Storage is now a lean forward conversation, because it's pretty cool when you dig into this. So I just thought I'd mention that.
No, and Dave, thank you, Tanya. Really good to have you, by the way. And Dave, you told me a story about how, you were getting progressively more frustrated talking to your clients in the early days of the pandemic, and that's when you kind of discovered Lucid Link, right?
Yeah.
Like kind of a revelation to you, right?
No, as I said, we were trying to solve this problem. I actually had someone from our federal team sort of alert me to the name Lucid Link. They had a customer that was using it, and that's how I got re-engaged with it. And we started really digging in and taking it apart. And I had the opportunity to meet Peter and his CTO George, and really just start talking a lot about the technology and bringing it to these customers, as I said, that helped me figure out what was happening here. And we have really advanced this in the last 18 months on a rapid scale. Like, I meet with their teams and we talk about some of the issues, and they've actually added features after talking to people like Zach and myself and others, just about what do we need. And you can't say enough about on the pricing model, you know, Greg, working with your team to sort of let's just make that as much of a non-issue. I kind of look at it as a medical bill. You're like, holy cow, I had no idea what this bill was going to be. And kind of you're wondering every month when something comes in, what's the next medical bill? Cloud storage is no different. And this makes it way more predictable. And I think with what you guys are working on, that really you know, alleviate some of the pain so you can enjoy what's actually happening and just get down to edit and stay creative.
Yeah, and David, if I can add in, I'm happy being the boring infrastructure, but you know, we have one simple goal. We want to provide a safe, secure infrastructure for many technology, and you know, this is just extending what IBM's doing around hybrid cloud. You mentioned storage, right? We believe whether it's storage, there will be some storage on-prem, some storage in the cloud. Some workloads will be on-prem, some will be in the cloud. Each business will figure out what's best for their business. And then our goal at IBM is to ensure that the security associated with that. And that's why when it comes to cloud, we're very focused on very specific cloud. So we're doing a lot of work around finance, implementing all the compliance rules associated with it. I saw one of the Q&As around 5G and Edge. We're selling that type of infrastructure to the telecom so they can deploy safe and secure infrastructure for 5G. So we are really happy to be in the background here and provide the appropriate infrastructure for these teams.
Yeah, I think that's a good statement. Keeping it as mostly invisible, right? To where it's a non-issue, and you've got a trusted name behind it. So,
I was just going to add in because we've been talking a lot about storage, but personally, I don't even think about our Lucid file space as storage. Really, that's our active work. So just let's not get away from. You know, I have one of our top producers, Marina, is based in Paris. She works on a documentary with some doctors. She puts it together. Matt, who's on the chat right now, is our editor based in New York. They could be on the phone and, oh, I'm having trouble with my key. Matt jumps into that project from the same location and is able to work on it instantly. So to me, I mean, storage, I don't want to be like a misnomer. We're not just storing things. We're working there every single day from all over. So
and
let's just make
sure.
I
did see a couple of questions about sort of, well, what happens as that active work sort of ages out, right? And what can you do with it then? Yeah, the question that I saw in chat here was, sure, you can move it to some other medium, whether that's on drives or whether that's in on tape or in Glacier. We are actively working with IBM to provide sort of that more cool tier. What we've heard from our customers is that even when the project is done, there's usually a pretty significant period of time when it's highly likely that you're going to have to revisit it, whether that's for localization issues, remarketing issues, whatever they might be. And the ability to just keep using it as if it's local is far outweighs the cost of having to go and pull it off of tape somewhere. So what we're trying to do is move from just that active high performance sort of class of working space into a more cost effective and longer term storage before it goes to what we say where data goes to die, which is the cold storage and off to tape.
Oh, and here's a question I know several of you love to talk about. Somebody asked how hard is it to set it up? So let's hear that from anybody who wants to talk about it, because I know I was amazed when I heard about that.
It would be biased from me,
yeah.
but
I'll let Zach.
We've got 5 minutes. I could set it up before the end of the call, and everyone could use it.
Yeah,
let's put it that way.
I mean, it's as easy as logging in, downloading the software, and loading it. I mean, really, you get up and running in under 5 minutes is usually what we do to train folks on our team and vendors. It's, you know, now we're down to just a couple sentences like download, do this, do that, understand what cache is when you're uploading and downloading. But no doubt that is the beauty here is that I never think about the setup.
Zach, I'll say it's easier than installing Zoom.
That really true?
It's true.
Well, let's not even talk about some of the Zoom alternatives. But anyway, a good question here. Have you had issues with people who don't have enough bandwidth? And how do you, Joe Kranz asked that. I think that's a really good question because, you know, here, even in this hotel yesterday, I was having trouble Zooming with my colleagues And I was thinking, holy shit, what happens if I'm getting a bad connection when I'm on the call, the session today? So what happens in that scenario?
I mean, I'll just tell from my experience, and obviously, you know, we all want to have more speed. But you know, I've on occasion accessed this when I was on a Delta flight using their Wi-Fi before, and I can get into my server. I can pull up a project, make some title changes. Like I can work. I mean, that's not a great situation. I'm sure if you've ever used the internet on an airplane, but it's been it really hasn't been a roadblock. And none of our people. Oh well, there's maybe 10% of our folks that actually have fiber in their house. I do not have fiber. Sadly, it doesn't come into my building. And so that was obviously our first hurdle was, oh, all my editors, they would never expect it to edit from home. You know, how are they going to get enough speed? But it has not been an issue. I think, I don't know, there's probably some minimum requirement, but you know, they all have, you know, at least 30 or 40 down when you have bad internet,
Yeah,
and it's always worked for us.
We've seen 20 up and 20 down be a good general rule of thumb for very basic editing for HD, and it seems to work fine. I think on your comment on the plane, Zach, you know, you've made the impossible possible, because you wouldn't even think of opening up a Premiere timeline just to look at it and say, I think you're on track here. Remember, I talked about collaboration and things like that. You might have to go in and say that. So keep that in mind. And we were working with India quite a bit, and I was working with the Lucid Link team out there, and they have bandwidth problems all over the place. Sometimes 20 is high for them. So you can go in and first of all, it's better than what they were doing, way better, because it works like any other drive. So I think it is all relative to that point. But you know, if you're on Wi-Fi, maybe try to connect on Ethernet to see how good can be. It's always my sort of general rule. But overall, it hasn't really been that big of an issue, because you could always create what we call proxies, lighter weight versions. And for our applications, Premiere Pro, it can do that automatically. So you get a real lightweight file, you edit it, and then when you go to render it, it actually goes back up to Lucid Link, grabs the original raw file, and will allow it to render that out. So from that standpoint, it just works.
There are other ways to help mitigate that from on just the settings type of thing. And if anyone who's having issues, please reach out to our support department. They can walk you through areas that you can test and check, find out where the bottleneck is and how to mitigate that. But I mean, yesterday also, I received from AT&T Fiber an offer for 5 gig fiber to the home for like under $100. You know, this is a problem that is on its way to sorting itself out. So that it's only going to get better from here, not worse.
Going to the 5G comment that somebody made, you know, there is a question. I mean, once 5G really gets deployed, which is going to happen over time, you know, you're not going to have bandwidth issues. And I love the Delta Airlines thing, but it is 11 o'clock or here in California, 2 o'clock in the East Coast. We are going to wrap. Unless anybody has any urgent last minute thoughts.
I was just going to say, we haven't even talked about Starlink yet, which means you can edit in the middle of nowhere, you know, for $99 a month. So again, this is going to be normal.
You can do it in the Sahara Desert. Yes, it's true. Well,
I would just add one thing, that the experience working with Peter and the whole team at Lucid Link, they are so supportive with our needs for sure. And it's just, you know, I'm sure anyone has questions about it. You know, I think there's probably some kind of demo system up there that people can use. It's worth a shot, and they've been so helpful with us. So, well,
thank you, everybody. Thank you, especially to Greg and IBM for the support of the session. The video is going to be available on our website, and we'll have some more stuff about it too. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and really a very dynamic conversation about a pretty amazing technology, and Peter ought to feel very good about what everybody has said, I would think in particular.
I'm glowing.
You got to see it to believe it.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Cool, clearly. Well, thank you, all 4 of you, and see you all on another Techonomy roundtable very soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.